was taken to the dialysis department and treated very nicely. And the head nurse said, "We need your permission to start a blood transfusion," to which I got really scared, and I was by myself and I didn't know what to say, but I heard again a voice say yes. And I thought, who is talking to me? And I said yes. And I don't know how much longer after that, I was walking through the clouds and it looked like Earth. It was beautiful grass and trees around. It felt like a park, just a beautiful park. And there was the blue sky, clouds in the sky with birds flying. And over to the left under the trees was Jesus. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh my God, you really do exist." And he laughed and he opened up his arms and he invited me to come over and give him a hug. I did. After giving me a hug, he turned with me. I turned to follow him. He said, "Come on, we have a lot of work to do." And I said, "Yeah, I know. You're dealing with me." But all of a sudden, I remember these cherubs, they were gold, and they started to come into the tent, and there were 300 of them. Now, they didn't all come inside, and the tent, it was big, but they come in and they start lining the walls of the tent. And then they were lining the walls of the outside of the tent, and in walked Prophet Muhammad. Now, I'd met him in temple, and I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know anything about Islam. I was surprised. And all of us stood and we bowed out of respect to him, because as it turns out, what I learned was that Prophet Muhammad and Jesus are the same love frequency, and that it's God, Prophet Muhammad, and Jesus who make up this tapestry of a sort. It's almost like it looks like a negative from one of the cameras when you take pictures. So the negative, that black and white kind of, that's what it looks like over this galaxy that we're in. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But back to Prophet Muhammad, he indicated with his hands, "Everybody sit down." And we did. And he directly looked at me. He said, "Megan, you will go back to Earth. You will tell everybody. I've been with the Middle East since I left. I've been praying for them ever since I left." He said, "I pray for the whole world." He said, "I want the best for everybody. I love everybody. I have love to give for everybody. I want you to tell everyone that you saw me here." I looked at Prophet Muhammad after he was done talking to me, and he just kind of looked at me, and I very softly, respectfully, sincerely spoke to him and said, "May I ask you a question?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "Why me? Why are you telling me all of this? I don't know anything about Islam. I don't know anything about you. I came in here an atheist of 18 years and I grew up Roman Catholic. That's all I've got. I don't know what else to tell you." And he said, "I have my ways." He was so confident in giving me this information and letting me know that there was no mistake here. So he just then looked at me and he says, "My time allotted with you has come to an end. I must leave now. Put the book out." And then he turned around and he started walking out. And then all of the cherubs followed him. So I started walking down this road. It's like dirt road. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I had to go to this shack, and I took off my toga or my robe or whatever and the stole, and I had to put it inside this wicker basket. And then I started leaving, walking in the direction back to the clouds, where I had to go back to myself in my hospital room. And as I'm walking, I remember seeing all of these cherubs like coming out before me, and there's Prophet Muhammad again, and he's walking through like a tall grass with flowers and stuff. He's coming out of the trees, the forest. I don't know if it was a forest or what it was, but he comes out and he meets me. So I'm walking this direction. He comes out and meets me in the center. And I looked at him and I thought, wow. I said, "I don't want to leave." And he responded very, very gently and sweetly. And he said, "Megan, you have to go back." He said, "But I'm never leaving your side. My hand will always be at your back. I will always be there for you." And I thought, okay. And I respectfully looked at him and I said, "Look, I don't know anything about your religion that you've started." And I said, "Is it okay if I give you a hug?" And to which he responded, "Yes." So I remember standing up on my toes and I put my arms around his neck, and then he put his arms around my back. And it was so sweet. And I just felt this unconditional love. And I let go of my arms around his neck, to which he let go. And I stood there before him and I said, "I love you." And he said, "I love you too." And then I remember the moment that I came back into my body. I don't remember how it felt. I just remember opening my eyes and there was a nurse in the room. I don't remember who else or if anybody else was in the room, but I looked at her and I said, "I just saw Jesus," because I didn't remember Muhammad right away, but I did remember Jesus. So she said, "You did?" And I said, "I did." It was so amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Then we walked back along the beach, and when we were almost at the beginning of the beach, he hugged me one more time, and then he disappeared. So I took 2 steps forward, and there on my left side and my right side were saints. They were all wearing white robes, but their heads were covered. I'm not sure if they were. I was not permitted to see what their faces looked like, but their heads were all bowed with the hood over. On my left shoulder was Archangel Michael, whom I grew up not knowing anything about. And on my right shoulder was Archangel Gabriel. The angels, white light with the wings. People have this opinion that white and floating, and no. For lack of a better phrase, they are bad, in excess of 9 feet tall. Archangel Michael with his sword. They are like soldiers. They are not hairy feathery. They are there on business.
Now, going back to the light, the brilliant light there, the only way that I've learned to explain it is when you're in a science class and you have a prism and you talk about refraction, the light shines through this prism. So you have the beam of light and you have the rainbow that manifests within it. And it's that incredible mixture of this beautiful white light with colour within it. And that is what I could see, but it was a very intense bright light that just absorbs you but isn't uncomfortable to be around. I would call that the universe or God. I really think it was so immense, and that was what emitting that feeling of peace and comfort. And when you explain about the Colosseum that was there, which was made of light, but the light it's so difficult to explain, it's frustrating. But if you think about on the earthly realm, there's the infrared and ultraviolet light, but we can just see a tiny fraction of that. And then in this realm, it must have just exploded that I had that full range. And another way that I've explained it before is a pearl within an oyster. It's that beautiful white colour, but you can see that pink and purple within it. But just imagine going to that full spectrum of infrared and ultraviolet. It's just a magnificent colour that is just, it's comforting. It's almost like a liquid. You're in this water-filled flow of comfortness, and it's the peace and the love and that unconditional love. People say it's like going home.
So we're moving really fast through these clouds, and we get to the end of the clouds, and there's this garden, and it was the most beautiful garden I'd ever seen. It was a beautiful sunny day. It felt like the perfect day, 75 degrees, zero humidity, birds, flowers, it was just the most beautiful place. And the colors were just so rich and vibrant, and there were colors that there weren't even words for. I could hear music, and it was like everything has a vibrational sound. The leaves on the trees, the flowers, each color, the water. There was a stream that just like looked like there was a bazillion diamonds sparkling in this water, and it was going over some rocks. And so I noticed that the rocks had a sound, the water had a different sound, each individual blade of grass had a different sound, colors, everything had a sound. And when you put all those sounds together, you hear this magnificent orchestra. It's like everything was singing praises to God, everything. And it was so beautiful. I call it big music because there were lots of instruments and lots of intricate pieces all put together to make this melody.
I could see them, all the nurses around. Then I opened my eyes. I looked around at the beauty. I could see the trees, I could see the grass, and everything was swaying with the music, because everything in heaven worships God. I can't convey to you what heaven looked like, because it's so above what we can even imagine, a million times.
And we're talking an infinite number of trees here, and I could see every vein on every leaf on every tree. And I realized everything was moving, but it wasn't wind. The grass was singing. The grass was singing the praises of God. And the flowers and the trees were moving to the song of the grass. And it was God moving through all those things that brought life to them, that they moved in God's light.
And as I came out of the tunnel, I could see beautiful valleys and flowers and trees and rivers and streams. And there were flowers that were below me, and I was traveling above them. And as I looked down at these flowers, some of them were very, very big. How big, I don't know, but I mean, really, really big. Not like we would see flowers here, the size of a house maybe, you know? And they were all making this wonderful music, or at least it seemed like it was coming from them. It was coming through the air and into me. And I had the understanding that these flowers, all this life, was there to support me.
I saw houses. So like the city is right here. Okay. Over here was the other buildings that I saw. Over here were these houses. And one was sitting on a bluff, and I could see the ocean water splashing up on the rocks. And the house was made of some kind of stone that kind of glistened in the light. There was a house directly behind it, and it was like a I don't know, English cottage type house.
Sure.
And there were beautiful rose gardens in the back. I don't know who lived in the houses, but they were definitely houses, and beautiful houses. I did see one room. My brothers were with me, so I was literally taken to this room. And they were having a party inside the room. And it was absolutely breathtaking. The people were all dressed in fancy clothes. There was a man sitting in the corner on a great big piano, and he was playing music, and there were candelabras and roses spilling out of vases onto the piano. It was just breathtaking. There was the floor was like marble, and they had a pink plush carpet on the floor. It's chandelier bigger than my house. And on the other side of the room, there were tables that had very expensive linen and silver trays. And on the trays, there was meats and cheeses and fruits and vegetables and pastries and just anything you could breads, anything you could possibly want. And no, the meat was not because animals were killed. It was because God can manifest anything with just a mere thought. No animals are killed. But it's whatever you want, and you don't have to eat to sustain life. You eat because you enjoy it, and families enjoy it, and people who gather, they enjoy gathering over food. So it was an amazingly beautiful.
A space where all that's left is love. There's nothing else. Everything, even compassion, is part of love. Appreciation is part of love. Value, joy, happiness, bliss, all of those are a part of love. So the only thing that's left is love. And that's why when people say, oh, love and light, there's actually a reason for that. That's all that there is.
They were organized in the way of the people who had the brightest lights were closest to the front, and then the dimmest lights, went further back, right? And so I remember like really taking note of the light, that was in front of me, which was my husband and my 5 children. And it's like the more I looked into their light, is the more I realized that the light that they were was actually love. And I realized like the more I looked into like, wow, this light is love. It's them, but it's love. I always thought love was, an emotion. But I'm like, no, this is what everything is made of. Because whether the people there had bright lights or dim lights, everybody was made of light. So it was all like the same substance, and that substance was light, but it was love. And so I just was getting this whole understanding of what love is, and that love is not an emotion, but it's actually like what everything is made of. Like nothing is created that's not created from love.
God had a wonderful existence prepared for me and for everybody else. And that in order to fully appreciate this existence, we had to go through an experience. Essentially, God had figured out a way to grow us or educate us, make us more fully able to appreciate how wonderful this experience was that God had prepared for us, or this existence that God had prepared. And I said, okay, I guess that sounds good. And I asked, couldn't you just change me to make me able to appreciate everything without having to go through some sort of education or experience? And God responded, yes, absolutely. God was completely able to change me in any way that God wanted to, but that I and everyone else was created with free will, and that free will was extremely important, like that we were allowed to choose whatever we wanted to. And that was like a key part of the reason for our creation and for our existence, and that God wasn't going to interfere with that free will. And it was very important that we be allowed to make our own choices. And somehow that was really, really important. Like that was a key to so many things, that so many natural consequences from that one that one important trait that we all have free will. So I said, okay. And God had this experience prepared to me, and it would allow me to fully appreciate all the wonderful things that God had in store for us. Essentially, as I understand it, God was loving, caring, kind, compassionate, forgiving. All these positive traits that you think of, like that really embodied who God was and my experience with God. It's kind of hard to explain how wonderful God is, but let's just take my word for it. God's fantastic, just wonderful. In order for us to freely to fully appreciate all this stuff that God has in store for us, because we're free will creations, like in order to really appreciate that, we need to, of our own free will, become compassionate, caring, kind, loving. We need to freely choose those traits that are the same as God in order to fully appreciate what God has in store for us. So anyway, God had created this way to educate us and allow us to use our free will to develop in those ways.
And God stopped me and said, Erica, hand in hand with the gift of life, I give free will. And I didn't really know what that ever meant until I had this near-death experience. I had learned about it in church and all that, but not like this. And what I understood was God loves not just a fraction of his children, but each and every one of his children that he's created so much that he gave the selfless gift, love. Love is the choice, free will, that we have to choose if we want to love him back. So he doesn't force anybody to love him. You're going to love me, or you're going to get, zapped by a lightning bolt. It's not like that. We can choose at any time to have that love connection that God has for us. And so it was amazing that, God's letting us have this gift of controlling, do we want to have this, connection or not?
Now what's happening is that life review. But it's not, there's no one else involved. I don't know the time. I don't know how long that it took for this, because you just lose your entire physical. But in the life review, you're seeing the different times in your life that you, because of your life on earth, you made a difference in someone else's life that caused a positive ripple. You see the opposite too. You see the times in your life when you really hurt someone, whether by deceit, whether by just not caring about them, indifference, anything, just being mean to them, but things that really affected them, especially the ones where you may not have considered that it really affected them as much as it did. Not only do you see all these things in the life review, you feel them from their perspective. And then on earth, you also have free will. You have the choice to connect. You have the choice to be good or bad to somebody. It's all going to come back. That's the thing about karma. It's all going to come back. You are going to feel everything that you've done to another person in your own life review. So Judgment Day is...
And otherwise, we can't function spiritually independently and make choices between good and bad, which is what God wants us to do. So we can't make choices of right and wrong, good and bad, kindness and cruelty. If we're in touch already with the spiritual world, it's kind of like having the answer book right there when you're taking a test. You're like, yeah, I see I'm supposed to be kind and loving.
When he separated the land and he did all of these things to it, when he said, let there be light, all these things, I got to watch happen. I watched him as he formed Adam out of the dirt, the dust, whatever you want to call it, of the earth. And I watched him as he formed him, and he made him, and he blew in his nostrils. And when he did, it's just like, and Adam was like, it's like he was alive, but he wasn't alive. In other words, he was breathing, but he didn't have the spirit. And when he breathed into him and the spirit became Adam, it was a completely different being on the inside out, you know. And all of a sudden he has all of this knowledge. We were created not just in his image, but in his likeness, meaning we were given not just the spirit, but the ability to think and do things. And where did language come from? It came from that moment when he breathed into the nostrils. Adam knew just about everything he needed to know because he was a part of God.
Just anything, any bad feeling that you've ever had, any kind of depression, jealousy, rage, all of it just drops away. And as each of those things drops away, that's when you're detaching from your body and you become one of these beams of light.
And I got to ask him a couple questions. And one was, how many universes are there? And so he pulls out this accordion and it has the most magnificent colors and just shining everywhere. And but when I came back, he never told me a number. And when I came back, I had to learn to comprehend again. I had to learn to write, read, think. Basically, I had to learn how to swallow food. Everything, walk, talk, obviously, everything. So it was a while before I could count again. And I put the accordion from in my memory on a piece of paper because I could write before I could count. And I remember running to it one day, realizing I could count with my therapy when I was at the rehab hospital part. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, almost as soon as it really felt like I was in that space for an eternity. It felt like I was probably there for 1,000 years. You know, it just seemed so peaceful and so, I don't know, it just seemed like that was where I belonged. I don't know.
Beauty that is just indescribable. And there was no time in this place. Time and I were the same thing, and everything was one in this place. In this place, I was everything and everything was me. And since there was no concept of time, it felt like I was in this place for an eternity. The voice in my head was completely gone, and I was processing information at a speed that I can't even comprehend now. I had complete and utter awareness, everything. I just knew everything. I don't know how to describe it. I just knew everything.
I then end up in a white room. I call it a room, but it has no doors, no windows, no walls, no floors. So it's this space. And there's this great master teacher behind me. And I relate this master teacher to the likeness of Krishna, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, the master teachers. And in front of me is a big pile of numbers. And I realized the universe is created in math. And I pick up these numbers and throw it up like I'm a little child, just no wonder you love creating. And I realized that the universe is created in math and code and programs. And I don't know why I found that so exciting, but I really did.
Before I knew it, I found myself being transported once again, going up so fast all the way into the clouds. And there it was. What appeared before me was the sun. I was sprawled out in the air above the clouds with the T or the A pose. The sun and everything else around me, which was this nothing but clouds and open space in the sky, and the sun directly in front of me had this beautiful golden light, unlike anything you've ever seen or felt before. Probably even better than the best golden hour you've witnessed in your life. I was surrounded by this light, and before I can ask, where am I hear this voice loud and clear, and then I hear a voice that said, I am Allah. And I noticed that it was coming from the sun, and the moment I heard his name, all of my questions and concerns have been answered, in the sense of revelation where the knowledge just comes to you by a divine source. So all the questions I had for God and why he do things the way he does has already been answered with just his name alone. He showed me that this is why he is the Almighty and indeed the All-Knowing. He knew everything I was going to ask, and he answered with his name before I can even speak. This is how he showed me his wisdom. And then I had other questions for him with sort of an attitude. So I asked him, what do you have to say about these terrorists? The things you hear on media? So if God wants to clarify things with me, now's the time. And he responded with, everything happens by my will. And at that moment, which at first seemed to be a vague reply, turned into a profound one, because he showed me an example. And that example was how I am here right now, standing right before him, only because he willed it. That this too is by his will and his will alone, for nothing can happen unless God willed it. From that response, I now fully understood that everything that has happened to me and everyone else at this point in time was all a part of the test, and that Judgment Day is real, and that Allah is the ultimate reality. And then I asked him, Allah, but why is Allah your name? And why Muslims? And his answer to me was, Islam is the final truth.
I went into depression. I don't know if you know what agoraphobia is. I had that. Mm-hmm. I couldn't leave the house. I was fearful of being out with people. Anxiety attacks, panic attacks. Mm-hmm. I went through all of that for a time, and I prayed about it, and understanding the power of prayer, understanding that prayers are heard. I watched prayers when I was in heaven. I watched prayers come up like beams of light, and so I know that. And these are these electrical things I was telling you about that go out. Right. So I knew about the power of prayer, and I prayed and prayed and prayed, but I wasn't getting much better. And then finally one day, I heard from my spirit, in my head, in my ears, the voice of God, you might say, find me in the world. Go out and find me in the world. Because I says, Heavenly Father, how can I live without you? I can't. He says, find me in the world. So I started going out around the block, and because I loved flowers since being in heaven, people who had gardens and whatnot, I would look at their gardens, and And I'd say, that's God in there, and that's God in there. I started finding him in everything. And I drew energy from that. And I knew that you could draw energy from anything, everything. The trees, the flowers, their spirit. Each living thing has spirit. Everything that lives and breathes and feeds, it has a spirit. And so I started hanging out in the gardens a lot. Mm-hmm. I became a tree hugger. Mm-hmm. And I started to gain my energy back. And then one day I was told it was time to write the book, and it was 19 years later.
So it was 19 years later that you decided to write the book.
I didn't decide. I was told.
My heart stopped, and I was clinically dead for 38 minutes. A staircase appeared to my right of where I was laying, and there was angels on that staircase on both sides, and a figure came down the center of it, and that figure was Jesus. He looked a little bit like a picture that we had in our church, but his hair wasn't long. It was very short and curly, and his beard was very well trimmed. And I knew it was Jesus because I could see the scars in his hands when he took me by my hand and lifted me up out of my body. And I was flying over this meadow, this green meadow, and I could smell honey and fresh bread so strong. And I was taken and stood in front of this big gold door. So pure, it was transparent. Well, all of a sudden, this door just flew open by itself, and this intense light poured out of it. I could see the bones in my hands kind of light. I heard these words, "Depart from me, you worker of iniquity, for I have never known you." And in an instant, an angel on my left and an angel on my right jerked me up out of there, and the peace that I was feeling while I was there was just destroyed. And they carried me across this dark chasm and just dropped me. It was dark, but you could see. The stench was so bad it smelled like rotten flesh, but the fire was so hot that you could feel the skin bubbling up and running off of you, and your flesh just melting and hanging off your bones. But when you looked down, there wasn't nothing wrong with it. So it could keep burning, and you could keep feeling that sensation all the time. And there was no relief from it. And I wasn't standing on the floor. It was people, other people. And these people were clawing at my legs and biting at my feet and my legs, trying to pull themselves out from under the people that was on top of them. And the whole time, people are being dropped in from above. It's like nobody's making it into heaven. I know that there were some folks getting in, but not nearly as many as you'd think, because there was a lot of them going into hell.
There was a lot of screams. There was a lot of fire. I seen a lot of people. There was a lot of people screaming. Before I go forward, I'm not saying this to scare you guys. I'm not here to scare anybody. I'm just telling you, this is the true what happens after death. I seen rivers of fire. People are burning. There's been people burning there for many, many, many years, hundreds of years. People their flesh burns. They burn, and the flesh falls. And your bones get nice and toasty and black and gray. And when it's done, then the flame, your skin, your flesh starts growing back on you. And then the flames start again. And I also seen maggot.
So dark. The first thing I could fear through going through this porthole was fear. And then I start to hear screams. Torture is screams, as is like an animal or somebody being tortured alive. It was horrific, the most horrific screams coming through this tunnel. When we get through hell, there's a ceiling in hell, and he slows down. And I remember clearly, I look to my right, And there's a dungeon, and there's demons in this dungeon, and there's people in this dungeons, and the demons are torturing the people. And I said to him, Lord, you could just drop me off right here. You don't take me down there. And he has me looking down. Now, hell is huge. And I was like in the middle of this pit of hell and looking down. And that's where I really started to see the torment of these people, because I was getting closer and closer to them. And the screams are getting even more louder. And the people were literally climbing on each other. And the longer the people have been in there, the less flesh they have.
It was horrible. You have people who look like bone. I would say they look like bones. Some of them were bones, but actually flesh hanging off, which is incomprehensible to some people to even imagine how, but the things that I saw and the tortures that I saw is that you regenerate. So just say if your arm falls off, it'll grow right back so you can get tortured again. It's a place of pure torture, like torture. Hell it's no relief. There's nothing.
We continued walking. There was some that you could tell they were ancient souls. They were not like we are, because we were tormented with the bills falling, right? Now you're going to the souls of an older age. This older age was the age of gold. You had some that were consistently vomiting molten gold. They were just continuously throwing up gold in its molten form. And they were being literally consumed until they're like everything else. You were down to your skeletal, and then you regenerated. Others were forced to drink molten gold. But here's the thing about those that were forced to drink molten gold. You watched these statues of false gods, of all these different gods, many gods. They would melt them in front of them, and it would be force-fed into them. So just they kept them with their mouths open, and they would have to drink their idol. But then it got more intimate as we walked on. I watched people that died in angry moments. I watched two men that were in a bar fight with broken glass, and they were continuously stabbing each other, slitting each other, and tormenting each other, but they would not bleed out. They were just locked in an eternal mortal combat. They could not die. I watched others who were angry in their last moments, and they went to shoot others. And as they shot the gun, and this shows how physics are different down there, the bullet went forward and then shot them through the back of their head. They fell down, and then they got up, and then they did it again. And then they did it again. And then they did it again. And then that messenger said, I know this is a lot, but you must witness one more. He said, those who are angry at God, he said, they need to see this. And he took me further as those that screamed out at God in anger. Those that screamed out at God in anger, they consistently had brimstone rain upon them. I'm talking like the stuff of Sodom and Gomorrah. Fiery, sulfury brimstone was pouring down upon them like rain. A constant rain they could not escape, and they knew it. They were all on their knees. They were all just accepting it as this molten fire burnt away their flesh and burnt away their member down, once again, down to the skeleton. Then you regenerate again. a clearing. And this is that picture I showed you. But like I said, don't think about it as orange and yellow flame. It's all blue. It's all raging fire. Blue and white, to be actually most accurate. On the walls, there was jail cells. There was jail cells in this level. All the walls, that it was carved into the walls of hell. Each one in these jail cells, and it was innumerable. The best way for me to explain it, when Neo wakes up in the Matrix, in the movie The Matrix, the first one, and he sees all the pods. Yes, imagine that now for jail cells. Each soul has a jail cell and it has tormentors in it. The first cell that I was allowed to see belonged to false teachers and false prophets. For the rest of their days, they were forced to consume altar coal. I'm talking the fiery altar coal that is on the altar of the holies of holies. Since they considered themselves holy, and this coal was blue burning, intense, not like the coal that we have in our barbecue pits. And I heard in the spirit, because they blaspheme my word to consider themselves holy, I will allow them to taste the wrath of true holiness. And they consume this coal eternally, again and again, and just as everything else, until you're down to your frame, and then you're brought back to experience it eternally.
A lot of these demons, they wanted to attack me. They wanted to rip me apart. And I can just feel the hatred that they have for mankind, the hatred that they have for us. It is beyond anything. It is beyond, and you can feel it's ancient, and you can feel it is powerful. It is power in their hate. It is so powerful. Yeah. All right, 1 second. Okay. Because people don't understand that these demons feed off our depression. They feed off our anxiety. They feed off our aggression. They feed off our hate. They just feed off of us. So that's why they call us in the background. They don't have the power to make us do it, but they have the power to influence situations that make us do these things. And they feed off that.
I also understood, because I felt it, the intense hatred that they have for humanity. The way the devil feels about you is beyond comprehension. He hates you so much that he wants you to go to hell. He wants you to burn in eternity in hell. You have done nothing to him, but he hates you. He is our enemy, our arch enemy.